All right, I'm back for part 2 of this video series on getting started with Appwrite Cloud, Vue.js, and Ionic Framework. There's a blog post on Dev2 that kind of outlines what was done in part 1. As you can see in part 1, we did login, logout, create account, and reestablish previous session. And in this part, we are going to try to cover add documents, list documents, and subscribe to events when collection is updated, so that as I add documents, my list will automatically get updated. And then in the final part, we will cover images, associating images with documents. There are not relationships in cloud yet, so we're going to have to figure out a creative way to handle that. But that's what we have planned. So please make sure you like and subscribe. Please share this content. And also please make sure you follow my blog on Dev2, because that's where you'll find kind of the source code, kind of me doing some more explanation, but there's always a link to the video included there too. And as you can see, a link to the actual source code in my GitHub repo. All right, so let's get to it. So this is where we are with the application right now. Let me zoom in. We have our login and our logout screen. Let's kind of make some minor changes to that first. So let's first kind of clean up all that noise that we have on our home page. So what we're going to do is we're just going to wrap a template around our title, and in our title we will include the user's name, display name. So we have this template. We're going to, if there's no user, we just display home. If there is a user, we're going to display home, and then we are going to display current user dot name, this display name value. So current user dot name. We'll worry about this TypeScript error later, but as you can see, I have my name up there, and if I'm not logged in, there's no changes. So now I will just comment out the content here because I might need it later to look up and see where other values are. So let's just comment that out. And so now that's cleaned up. Let's move this. Let's create a little bit of room on our page. Class and padding. Kind of get us some space there. And let's also find, here's our logout button, Ion float, right? Kind of move it to the, why did it not move? Oh, we have an extra, there you go, move that there because we need to add our AddItem button. So let's do the UI for adding a new document first. And so we are going to float left, and we're going to change this to AddItem, and we're going to change this to, when we click on AddItem, we want to display a modal. So all we're going to do is we're going to copy this pattern up here, where on create account we displayed a modal, and now on AddItem we're going to display a modal, and we'll use the same naming pattern. So we'll say AddItem is open, and that doesn't exist yet. So let's go down here and add it. Const. So the modal is not open yet. And what else do we need? We need to actually create the modal. So we're going to create the modal based off of either a login or create account. They're both the same. They have text input fields, and that's what we need. So let's just do create account modal. So copy, paste, rename, AddItem modal. And we have that there. Let's do this create new item. So that will create, that's our title. And then for our items, let me look and see the fields that we are going to need. The title, hold on, title. And so now we got to change all of our refs. So this is title ref, text, placeholders, title. Not really sure we need it here, but let's just keep it description, ref, text, description. We don't need a password, but what we will be adding later is the ability to upload images, and so we'll add an additional field to this modal for handling capturing a file and uploading it. Just to cover what we did before, we have some properties that are passed in, which is the isVisible, which lets us know whether or not to display the modal. And then we also emit an event, which is the onClose event. And if I don't have a value, I pass back null. If I do have a value, I pass back the values from the page. And so that's what you're seeing down here. On my doSave, I'm going to pass back a title. And that's off my title ref. Title ref. And then, let's create those. Title ref and description ref. And I don't need a password ref. So that's title ref, description ref, and let's change this description. And then let's change this to the last parameter we need to get passed back is a file, which will be a file object. And for now, we're just going to make it undefined because we're not implementing that in this phase of the project. So now, when I click on my AddItem button, it should show my AddItem modal, but let's go back to my home page. Actually, let's make this a little bit bigger. Sorry. I want to make sure you guys can see this. And if the font's too small, it makes it hard to see. I think I can actually go one more. Yeah, I can go one more and kind of save the space there. Apologies for all that. Okay, so I've created my AddItem modal. I have my save, my emit, close. I have my input fields I'm tracking with refs, and then on a save, I pass back the values that I want. Now, let's go to my home page and make use of it. And in my home page, let's copy. All right, so I added my AddItem, which will toggle my reference to hide and show the modal. So let's copy this pattern here and do my AddItem modal. Let's move this up. And I have, I have created this. So I can change this to AddItem modal. And this is AddItem is open, and then this should be do AddItem, which we haven't created yet. Let's import my modal. So that imports my modal. There's my AddItem is open, and then now I need my function. This one's the easiest, the smallest one to copy, so let's just copy this, and then we'll follow our normal pattern. So we'll go up here, and we will create do logout, do AddItem. But the difference here is, actually that was a bad one. I should have copied this login because we have all the modal stuff. So on do AddItem, the first thing we want to do is close our modal. So we'll say AddItem is open and set to false. Then the next thing we need to do is check and see if I got any payload response, and that's why this was a bad one to use, because I need to get a payload. So on my do AddItem, I get a payload, but remember here we're getting back a title, a description, DSC, and then we have our last optional file, which is of type file, but it is optional. So let's kind of put a comment around that so we get some space. Here, if we only want to do this work if I have a payload, so let's wrap the code with that. And then let's remove this because this is where we're going to add our new functions that we're getting from the new composable that we're going to create to manage all this. So let's see, why do I have an error? That's not stopping me. Let's refresh. All right, so AddItem, my modal, blah, 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 save, create new item. Let's just do one last thing in here to make sure that the code is getting where it's supposed to go. Let's go up here to AddItem and alert. And then we're going to JSON stringify my payload. and see what we get back. So AddItem, save, and we're getting back the data that we passed in, which is exactly what we're looking for. All right, so we know our basic UI is in place. Now let's create the composable that is going to interface with Appwrite. But first, we need to set some things up in Appwrite. So let's go to our console. We are using Project 2, and in Project 2, we need to create a database. We'll keep it simple. We will call it Database 1. We'll create that database. We'll create our collection. Once again, keep it simple. Collection 1, create. And then now we need to add attributes. We already stated that our attributes are our title, our description, and then we're going to have some fields to support our file. So let's put them in. Let's say title. That is a string. Let's make our title 128. Required, create. Back to our attributes. Let's create another attribute title. Description, string, size 256. No, let's get crazy. 256 is fine. 256, required, create. And then when we upload our image, because we don't have relationships, we're gonna keep the file ID, which will be a string, and 128 should be sufficient for that. It's not required. We're going to keep the file ID, and then we're also going to keep the actual URL to the file. File URL, and we're going to save that as a URL, and that is not required, and we're going to create. So these are the 4 fields that we have, and now let's go back to our documents. There's no documents. Let's go to some of our settings. So for permissions, who can access this collection of documents? We will say all users. So basically all authenticated users can create, read, update, and delete. But then we'll also turn on document security, and let's update that. And what we're going to do is we're going to set the permissions on the documents as we add them in. So this space is saying everybody can do it. But once the documents are created, the only people that are going to be able to manipulate the documents are the people that created the documents. All right? So that's what we did here. The permissions have been updated. Now I need my collection ID, and I need my database ID to create the client access that I need. Because if you see, if we look at, here's an example of creating a document, and to create a document, I need a database ID and I need a collection ID. And the approach that I am taking is the similar approach that I used when creating, where are my composables? I'm pulling the imports in from Vite, but what I'm going to do is I want to keep them all here inside of my Appwrite composable, and I'm just going to export them. So I can say config, and then what we will do is we'll just use these exact same values. We'll say database ID, and I'm going to get these from my .env file. So I'm going to import database ID, and then we will also do a collection ID. Did I spell that wrong? Collection ID. These guys don't exist. I need to copy these values over and add them to my INV, so we're going to pause the video for a minute here while I do that. All right, so now I have those values, and I'm exporting this. Actually, let me just make this capital letters. I think it'll make better sense. Let people know large letters usually assume they're constants of some sort. All right, so now I can export these, and I will have access to them. Documentation. I'll have access to them when I want to create the document. But like I said, we want to create a composable the same way we created a composable for managing accounts. We're going to create a composable for managing access to the database. And so what's the best one? I'll start this one from scratch. And so let's say useAppwriteDB. Try to keep it short, so I don't have to type that much. useAppwriteDB, TS, and export useAppwriteDB. So let's change this to our const. And what we want to do is, here's where we're going to put our functions to manipulate the database. But as you can see here, I need a client, and I actually I don't need a client, I just need this databases object. But what we want to do is, since we don't want people to be created multiple times, we're going to just create it right here inside of my client. And we're going to say data. I'm only going to use one database, so I'm not going to call it databases. I'm just going to say database ref, and we're going to say new database. And because we're using TypeScript, I'm going to add my types in. That's type of database is, and this is a type of account, I believe. And let's get these imports with my magical imports. All right, what's going on? Expected zero type arguments. Oh, I'm putting my types in the wrong place. That's what's going on. These belong on the ref. So now let's create my database ref. Const database ref equals ref. And here's where my types belong. That's why things are going crazy. This is an account. And this is a database. Next database is. All right, and I do that so that I can get my types. All right, so now the last thing to do is to export database. Database. I cannot type. Okay. Let me get my database ref. All right, so now I have access to my database ref. I have my collection ID and my database ID, all of which I need to actually create a document. So now let's go to my useAppwriteDB, and here I'm going to import useAppwrite, and then off of that I get the things that I want. So I want const database. Actually, I can do this. I can say useAppwrite, and then from the composable I just created, I can get my database, and I can get my config object, which will have these values that I need. And then let's say const do create document, and we need data, which we will say is any, and we need a user. Do I need a user on create? Yes, because I'm going to add permissions, so I need a user. And we know that this user is a string, and it is, so all these fields are required. Let's do my returned, and we're going to return do create document. And I already have my database created, so let's just copy this guy in and start to manipulate it. First, let's wrap this in a try catch. And return the error. And when you return an error, my data is undefined. And inside of my try catch, let's paste our function. And we are going to call this service. Let's call this data to make it easy. Use async await. Let's make this async. And we are using our database, which is a ref. So we have a value. Data, oh, I don't need it there. I need it here. Await. Oh, I didn't put this stuff inside my function. So let's take this and let's close this function. I need this ID, this ID concept, which allows me to create a unique identifier for my object. So here's my document. I'm going to take all my data that I got and move it over into there. And so let's call this item data. So we move all the item data there. Let's replace these using our config.DatabaseID, config.CollectionID, unique ID, our item data. And then the last thing is, as you can see, there's this permissions object. And like we said, we want to control, the only person that can modify this document is the user that created the document. And so to get that to work, there's an array of permissions that we can pass in. So let's lay out the array. Let's import, we'll import the types later, but let's get the code for that. So this basically says that the user ID that I pass in, based on from the user ID that I'm passing in, only that they have the permission to read, to update, and to delete. Because the document's already been created, and they're going to have that permission. So now let's add all of our missing imports to get our types imported that are needed, types and functions that are needed from Appwrite. So they are now imported. And now we need to handle our error condition the same way we did here. So we're going to do this. So we return data or error. And if I don't get any data, I don't need to do that. So no, because this thing will throw an exception on an error. So this throws an exception on an error. Otherwise, it returns, see, it throws an Appwrite exception. The Appwrite exception will get caught here, return. Otherwise, it returns my data and my error is undefined. So this is what I need to do to create a document. All right, now I return my doCreateDocument. Let's see if we're going to get lucky and get this guy to work on the first pass. So let's go back to my home. And this current user value, user preference, type no. Where am I? Do add item. So what do I call it? Do create. I was hoping it would auto import. So let's import our new composable. So import useAppwriteDB from composables useAppwriteDB. Okay, so where was I using it? Here's useAppwrite account. Let's just do it on top. Const useAppwriteDB. No. This is, let's do it, equals useAppwriteDB. And then in here, we could use a TypeScript. Will let us know what we have. Do create account. And so now we have our do create account. And let's go into our do add item. Did I say do create account? I meant do create document. And now let's go into our do add item. And add item. So here we are. If I have a payload, then const get my payload data. Actually, I don't even need to do that. It's extra code. I can just pass that all in. So I can say const response equals do create document. The item data is my payload, and the user ID is current user value. And I know it's $ID is the user's ID. And then if response.error, first of all, this needs to be await. And then I get back the results, and if response.error, throw the error. Otherwise, everything was successful and my document was created. And we'll just console log response.data to see our document that got created. Otherwise, it should throw an error, and error should run to here. So we'll say error creating new item. All right, let's see if we get lucky and get it to work on the first time. So let's go back to our app. Let's add an item test1, test1, script, dscript, gion, save. You're seeing required parameter database ID. All right, so did it not export my useAppwrite accounts? Right, let's just fix these because I added the type, so we're getting all of these potential errors. Let's correct that. Oh, did I miss one? Okay, so I don't need account. My Appwrite's saying it didn't have a data, so import meta and vite. I didn't put my v on there. All right, let that rebuild. And now let's try to add an item again. Test1, description. And let's see, did my item get added? So let's take a look at my developer tools. This looks like my object, and the object was added to my database. You can see all the permissions are there, and here's the description, and there's a title. So we were able to add items. So let's just quickly, based on time, let's just quickly show the list of documents. And so to do that, let's go back to our AppWrite our DB composable. And let's do we need to read our data. Let's go back to the documentation, like the leverage documentation. Indexes, retrieving documents. So we're just going to copy this pattern. And we will also copy the pattern of our doCreateDocument. So first our doListDocuments. And it's complaining because that doesn't exist, but it's about to. So let's just copy all this goodness. Copy, doList. We need the same parameters, DatabaseID, CollectionID. We have no query. We can move this, we can move this, we can move this. We're just going to get everything right now. And so we can say list documents. It's happy, it has everything it needs, and then that is it. Let's remove these parameters because we don't require any parameters right now. Potentially we could pass in a query, but for now we're just going to do that. And let's remove this because we don't have any parameters. And we have doListDocuments there. So let's go back to our home page. And let's just right underneath this. So if I have a current user, then I want to display all this stuff. Let's just put a div in here for now, and we're going to just display all of our data there. So we've already have our list document, which will help us get the data in there. And what we'll do is we'll leverage an Ionic function. Where's my Ionic imports? Called Vue will enter. So what we will do for now, because this is kind of the easiest solution, is we will go up to the top here. Let's go all the way to let's go here. We'll say use, what is it? What did I just import? On Ion Vue will enter. On Ion Vue will enter. We will just load our data. So what we can do here is, I hope this works. So we'll say const. No, we're not going to say const. Yes, we're const. Response equals, what did I call it? Well, first we need to import it from our AppwriteDB. So let's see what's left to import. doListDocuments. So wait, doListDocuments. It takes no parameters. Need to add our async here. If response doc response data, then documents dot value equals response data documents. And let's add a ref for this. So let's go up here, and add a ref. Oh, not doListDoc. That's not what I wanted. I wanted documents. Oh, item. Let's make it specific. Item documents. We'll go up here. We'll say item documents, and we'll set it to. We'll say it's either or null or undefined. Looks like it has a document, so we'll import the document. Did I not import? Let's see. It looks like it did not import the right document, so where is it getting? Yeah, that's the browser document. That's not the document that I want. I want the document type from Appwrite. It's the first time I'm using types inside of here. Looks like it is, so all right, what's going on here? So this needs this documents type to be modals document list and then models document. So I need models. And then down here, this should be models document. There we go. So what'll happen is every time this page is loaded, it will get the list of documents from my API call. And then it will, if I have documents, then it will look in this object and it will just return the documents that exist in there. So we want to also only execute this if I have a user. All right, let's complete. I need to wrap this whole thing. There's another scenario where I actually need to call this, and I also need to call this when I check to see if I have a user. So let's modify this. And let's execute. Let's clean up. This is a promise. Let's format this a bit. So when I get my user, if I have a user, then get the documents and set them to list documents. So then that means that what we want to display up here inside of my div is list documents. List documents. And why can I not see that? Oh, sorry, I called it item documents. So let's see what we're getting. Other than a big fat error. All right, so you can see I logged in and it's rendering the one document that it found. It's kind of rendering it in a really, really weird place. Because those guys are all floated. Let's just try. I mean, we're gonna do a whole cleanup job on the UI once we get the images imported, and we'll fix the list and we'll bring in some more Ionic documentation. But div. All right, so we have our template, we have our div, and then down here we have our div. I think all that stuff is happening. So to clean this mess up, we need to clear the float. So let's try, see if my CSS is on. So let's do clear both. There we go. So that cleared them both, so that moved it down. And then let's do margin top. Sorry, getting my languages mixed up. Margin top 8 pixels. Actually, let's make it 16 because I'm on this 8 thing. So 16. Can I do that with the clear there? I don't think I can. So let's do this. I'm not a CSS expert, so I'm just kind of moving along here. So that clear, and then so I'm clearing the float, and then now putting a margin. Took a little too much. So we get a little bit of space. So like I said, I'm not going to play, that looks bad. So let's just quickly just display the title and the description. And so how we might do this is an IonList, and then inside that IonList we have IonItem, and then inside of our IonItem, here's where we do our v4. So it's gave me a little bit too much, so let's try something else. v4, let's try this one. Oh, item in items, and then key equals, and this items is item documents, and in here we should now have some values, but we want to do an ion label, and for now we'll just do p item dot ID, item updated at, and then we'll put our name and description in. Okay, and then so now we can kind of take this out, and we just have our basic information. Let's add the objects that we need. So we need IonList, IonItem, IonLabel. All right, and that's what we got. And then well, my trick with on Vue did load is not going to, we'll see if it works. I'm not certain if it's going to work with the modal, so let's try it. So let's add a new item. Vue did load test, and save, and it did not. Let's refresh. So on refresh I get my items, but the Vue did load did not work. Because the Vue did load's only catching it on the first time. I mean, ideally, I would save this inside of my Composable and just get the data from there. Can I do that trick now? Let's see, useAppwriteDB. I think I can do that. Let's try that approach. So we're just going to create our documents here, and we are going to out here say const documents equals. So what we can do is we can take this same object that we had created internally here, and we can make it reactive, and then our Composable will always have the most recent documents in it. So I'm just going to copy all this. We're going to come out here, we're going to go back to our database, and we're going to create this value, and I need to import refs. So ref from Vue, and then I need to import models and models from Appwrite. And so now I have my item document, and so then what I can do is inside of my doListDocuments, I can still return the values, but I can also set my item documents dot value equal to my data dot documents. So, and then now I can return my documents, and this will be reactive. So whenever this guy gets updated, it will send a reactive a ref basically that has the updated documents. So now in doListDocuments, these guys get updated, and then what I can also do is on here for now on the create, I could subscribe. No, let's just keep this simple for now. What we're going to do for now is we're just going to call the function. As we add more functionality, we're going to call the doListDocuments function. As we add more functionality, we'll we'll add subscriptions so that anytime the database is updated, it will automatically call the subscribe function. So we're just going to go in here and say doListDocuments and await. And then what will happen is that this, after I create my document, it will call this function. doList will get all the new documents. It will update item documents. Item documents are assigned to documents. Go back to home page. We can leave this here for when the view first enters to get them all. All we need to do is call the function, because we are not using our local variable anymore. We are using our variable from here called documents. And then what we do is we go up here and let's change this to documents. And so now what should happen is that when the app first starts up, if I have a user, it will call doListDocuments. Down here, when I log in, it will call doListDocuments to update our reference. And then on our AddItem, we don't need to call it because we are calling it inside of here, which will update it. And let's see if we can get my app to run again. All right, my app is running. I have all my documents. So we know that it updated it from, well, let's remove this to make sure nobody's using that. All right, I got an error. Who's using it? Oh, I'm in the wrong function. I do want to use it there. I mean, I want to make sure nobody's using it inside of my home. So let's move it here. All right, we got no errors. Everybody's running. So now let's add a new item. New item added. This is a description. Save. And we get our new item added. And with it, this is the description. So that's what we wanted to do. So we'll clean up our styling. We'll address the order. Maybe we'll touch on subscriptions in the next video. But we now have the ability to add items to our application. So did we get on everything we wanted to cover? So add documents and list documents, subscribe to events. We'll push subscribe to events to the next one along with upload images and associate images with documents. We'll probably also add delete. So hopefully you enjoyed this. Please make sure you like and subscribe. Keep a lookout for the source code, and I will talk to you later. Bye.